Hi there. If I could leave you with one message, it would be this. Well, oh boy, I have more than one message. But we have to win. We Republicans have to win in November. And we have to win big. Don't let any disappointments about this Republican or that Republican keep you from voting Republican. You have to understand how politics works. You can't be a purist in politics. I think I have so much sympathy for our president because I was in politics, sort of. I was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Command, Control, and Communication at the Pentagon. And I understood some of the limitations of what I could do. You have to, and I worked with a lot of politicians. I was kind of a driver, if you will, and I took Dianne Feinstein around different aerospace companies and got to know her really well when she was running for the Senate. I traveled with Kathleen Brown to New York City, and she was running for, and she won Treasurer of California. I met many, many politicians. And I saw the pressures that they were under. But it's nothing like it is now. And to see how our president is navigating it. For example, let me just give you a quick example. I mean, he should fire those generals that, some of them are retired, but fire and clean house at the Pentagon. This is terrible, terrible what they did. Obama cleaned house, but nobody said anything. That's why he hated Flynn, because Flynn testified, Michael Flynn testified against him. Against what the Obama administration was saying. And so, he fired him. He got no pushback for that. Remember, everybody was saying, fire Jim Comey, the FBI director. It seemed like a non-controversial decision when President Trump fired him. But what came out of that? Suddenly the whole Mueller investigation, all of that. So do you understand what our president is going through right now? So he has to be very careful. So if he's a little bit tame for you and you don't like it, you have to understand where his real sentiments lie. When he can get reelected, he can clean house. And these Republicans that we don't like, these rhinos, just put pressure on them. That's what we do. But we have to get a majority in the House. Okay, that's enough on that. As I've been reflecting over a lot of what's going on, I realized that a lot of this is not new for me. For example, it was a long, slow process for me to investigate the science behind so-called global warming, which I at first believed because I like science. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while. And to tell you the truth, most people do not understand the scientists. So if scientists say something, they think, well, I want to support science, so I believe it. So it's very hard to talk to people. So what do the people who want to push the climate catastrophe, climate alarmism narrative, what do? Well, first of all, they denigrate anybody who questions it. Okay, you're a science denier. There were people who are in academia who actually lost their jobs. So what that kind of cancel culture does is people shut up. I know a lot of Caltech scientists, and I've had private discussions with a lot of them. They don't really buy into all this, but But I realized they cannot speak out. They can't. They absolutely can't. So they just, I don't know if I want to say ignore it, but they just focus on other things. Because you have to live in that community. And the community is all believers. They didn't stop me from speaking out. But let me tell you, it depended on where I spoke out. If I spoke out on the Geology and Planetary Sciences Chairs Council that I was on, that I am on, I didn't really get much pushback. Not at all. Because those people there were knowledgeable on the issue. But on the Biology and Biological Engineering Chairs Council, if it came up, oh, you don't believe? They were shocked because everybody there knew I loved the science. I'm always one of the most enthusiastic members. I'm always the most sort of well-informed. I kind of do my homework before I go to these meetings. I ask good questions. That's why I love these Chairs Councils, because they're interactive. You can talk directly to the scientists. You can question them. You can, anyway. And then the PMA, Physics, Mathematics, and Astronomy Chairs Council that I'm also on, it doesn't really come up. So I think I've mentioned that I don't really go for the global warming thing, but that's not really an issue. But it's very interesting in the biology one. Okay. What is interesting about this that's going on is take the whole thing about the pandemic. There hasn't been time to denigrate any particular expert that comes up in the sense of calling them a denier, because the experts are all over the map. They don't know what they're doing. So this has been interesting. And then there's been doctors in the field. And I don't want to repeat, I don't need to repeat what, there's so much good information out there. But the bottom line is, this pandemic is nothing to worry about. We should never have shut down, and we will never shut down again. Never. Because we saw that it turned out to be a power play. It was supposed to be for 2 weeks. So all we good Republicans and conservatives who follow the law, follow the rules. Oh, we followed the rules all right. And then those rules kept going until now you have the George Floyd incident, which I do not understand these protests. I do not understand these protests. One bad cop did a really bad thing. Why now? First of all, people are stir crazy. That's, I think, one of the reasons why. God, anything to get out of the house, anything to protest. But here's the interesting thing. People kind of, so I would say maybe half the population, I'm not sure what the number would be. They kind of understand illness because it's in their family. They may know people who are sick. So I'm thinking that, don't most of us know? I mean, I certainly know, but don't you know how much of this was just nothing? How much masks don't work? I mean, you should be outdoors playing, kids should be in school, we should not be social distancing. We have treatments, hydroxychloroquine and zinc and azithromycin. I mean, it's unbelievable how well that cures people. It's almost like they didn't want to cure. All this talk about ventilators, don't go blaming President Trump for that. He was responding to the governors. We need ventilators, we need ventilators. They got their ventilators. Well, I just tweeted out a horrific video about how many people put on ventilators, young people too, in New York, this Elmhurst hospital, and who died. Who didn't need to go on ventilators. This very brave nurse, very smart nurse, documented all of this. And I've heard this many, many, many other places as well. These people don't even know how to use ventilators. So I think in those two things, and also racism, I think most people know. For example, you know, there's all these videos where I'm not going to be racist, I'm going to fight systemic racism. And what causes racism? A lot of it is stereotypes. Now, I will have to say something for Hollywood in favor. Not now, but previous. They did a lot to combat racism and sexism and homophobia by just showing people working together, being together. The military has always been that way. They've always had, since President Truman integrated the military, you worked alongside people of different colors, races. So people in the military got used to it. So what really does cause racism is when you keep talking about it. And oh my God, I saw this one thing where Sesame Street to teach little kids about racism. I mean, little kids don't think that way. Oh my gosh, we are creating divisions. So I watch my brain. Thank goodness I know a lot of beautiful, super smart, super hardworking minorities. So, but I gotta tell you, sometimes now, right now, since I've seen all those pictures of the looting, which I find abhorrent to the max, if I pass a group of black people, I have to think for a second. I have not had that, okay? And I think, do you think you need special privileges? That is the first thought that pops into my head now. So I have to combat that. I never had that before. What are we doing to people? First of all, let me talk a little bit about special treatment, affirmative action, which is a lot of people are now bringing this back up again. We've been through this, folks. Okay, like one of the things when I got involved in the late 1980s and early 1990s in trying to get more women elected to public office. I was in all these different women's groups in LA. We were raising money for women. One of the things we always talked about was you tried to get away from the use of the term qualified. By the way, I heard Joe Biden use this term. His poor brain. He doesn't realize you don't do that anymore. Because you would say, well, that woman is qualified. And why would you say that? Because the assumption would be she got there because of affirmative action, and unless you specify that she's qualified, she's not qualified. So we changed it to viable. We will support viable women candidates, female candidates. And what that meant was, do they have a base of support? Or if we put money and effort into getting that person elected, do they have a viable race? But you try to get rid of the word qualified. Well, if you give special privileges to blacks, for example, that is so ruinous for them because people will know that, okay? So you have all these brilliant blacks, okay, that get in there, work hard, do well, but they're going to have that slight asterisk. Because if that institution that gave them that degree or did anything, it's like, were they really that good? Did they really make it on their own merits? Or were they just let in? So all of this is incredibly, incredibly counterproductive. Stop it. I was listening to this video. I listen to a lot of these little videos on Twitter. But this was of some actors to fight racism, systemic racism, and speak up. And I'm like, really? You have to make a vow to do that? What's wrong with you? I remember in the year, I think it was 2001. It's back when I was a Democrat or whatever. But there was a big party that my brother-in-law and his wife gave in Palm Springs. So Harold and I went to it. So I'm sitting in this room with a bunch of pretty wealthy people. And one of the guys, who was a longtime friend of my brother-in-law, got up and he told a joke. And it was a very crude joke. It was derogatory toward women. But then it was also, the woman was black. So it's almost like, you know, it was just an awful joke. And I could tell everybody was like, didn't like the joke. But you know, I was the only one that said anything. I said, Bill, first of all, that's a sexist joke. But why did you have, what did being black have to do? Why'd you have to throw that in? I mean, it could be any woman. I mean, it's a terrible sexist joke. But why did you have to say she was black? I mean, I really called him, and he goes, oh, Deborah, oh, whatever, you know. And I'm thinking, people didn't even speak up. What is your problem, okay? So when you say, I'm gonna speak up, well, yes, speak up. If somebody is doing something like that, say something, do something. Don't allow it. I mean, I didn't get any pushback because nobody liked the joke. Nobody liked that he was doing that, but they were all too whatever to say anything. That just disgusts me, okay? It disgusts me because that's just wrong. Now, there were other ways. You don't have to be a Karen for something that's not like that. I was thinking about, I used to always, Harold and I would do Thanksgiving for our kind of big extended family here. We had like 40 people, all my siblings and their kids. And we did this for many years. Well, I remember I had a pretty funny, raunchy album from the Soul Sisters from the 1920s. These women singing all these double entendres about sex, you know. I mean, they were funny. So my sisters and I, and my mother, you know, we were all laughing and dancing around. And then I looked around. I thought, Denise left. Now, Denise, as I've told you, is my conservative, brave sister. She just quietly left the room. And I thought, no, we don't need to play that the next Thanksgiving. That was, she didn't lecture anybody. She didn't say, oh, this is terrible. She didn't do any Karen. She just, with great dignity, just left the room. Denise, I always remembered that. That's another thing you can do. I mean, there's nothing racist or sexist. She just, I'm not going to be a part of this. But she didn't say anything to any of us, which was very sweet, but very dignified. I've always admired that, Denise. I don't know if I ever told you that. But it had a big impact on me. I've been thinking a lot about protests. Who goes to protests? Protests are a way to get meaning in your life. And I know a lot of us think that, oh, you know, this is all planned. Well, my brain, I'm sorry, I can't project that. My brain doesn't work that way because I think things are far more disorganized. I mean, it's more like, ooh, I can use this for that once it's happened. But it's very hard to start something. So take the fact of these protests, like defund the police. Oh, Terrible, terrible, terrible idea. But okay, whatever. Now, didn't we just have those school shootings and all those protests for gun control? People talking about it, protesting about it, the cause du jour. Well, I'm sorry. Gun control is out the window. Because if you don't have police, you got to have guns to protect yourself. Even in that autonomous zone, Capitol Hill autonomous zone in Seattle, they have AK-47s. They have guns there. They have their own little police force. If you don't have the police, somebody, could be your little warlord, but somebody is going to have to enforce laws. Do you want them to just be some warlord or somebody you got to pay? It makes no sense, people. It makes no sense. So we have to ask ourselves, what are the Democrats doing? I used to be a Democrat, as you know, a very active Democrat. And one of the things I noticed was liberal in the late 1980s. To say you were a liberal, it was like a bad word. Because Reagan was popular, even though, the Democrats didn't like him at all. But being a liberal was a bad word. So what happened? Even I, a Democrat at the time, I had some writings about how maybe I'm a Republican. It almost surprises me because I became such an active Democrat after that that I almost forgot that I was thinking about being a Republican, because I was really more about women's rights at the time than being a Democrat per se. But one of the things that happened was, and there was a lot of crime. Oh my God, I remember going to New York City and, okay, you're gonna get mugged. Remember they used to have those Charles Bronson movies, and Clint Eastwood movies where, they would shoot the criminals. There were just criminals everywhere running the streets. I mean, you were scared to go walk in New York City. I remember, oh my gosh, you got to be prepared. And then later, you could go all over New York City and feel safe. That wasn't a problem. But anyway, liberal became a bad word. Crime became a bad word. So I've been noticing, showing old clips of Joe Biden talking about the crime bill. But you have to understand, for Democrats, that became the new message. You fought those kinds of things. There was just too much of that liberalism. It was a bad word. That was the opening for Bill Clinton. That was the opening for Dianne Feinstein. I remember Barbara Boxer. I had all these women here at my house, okay, because I would sometimes have, people would ask if I could use my house for fundraising. But I remember saying to her, I support you, but I'm a little concerned that you're kind of not pro-business. She goes, oh no, Chapter, I'm very pro-business, blah, 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 okay? People want to be pro-business, okay? President Clinton, part of his thing was more efficient government, community policing. He took on Sister Souljah. She was a real radical black woman who, he took on welfare queens. That's what they were called at the time. People were taking advantage of. He would talk about a hand up, not a hand out. Some people would, it was called triangulation, but the point was, they were not, they quit using the word liberal. And I think that's probably, I'm guessing, I haven't really researched this, is why the word progressive took hold. Because liberal was just considered wimpy, terrible. And let's also remember that, the treatment of the police today, which I find horrific, although I am interested about the police unions. That's interesting. I don't like public sector unions, but I've been mostly familiar with the teachers' public sector unions and how they fight school choice, charter schools, which I think is horrible, okay? I didn't realize that the police unions sometimes protect bad cops. I don't think there's very many bad cops, not like there used to be. I mean, they've really cleaned up their act, but if they clean it up a tiny bit more, okay. But, oh my God, what these police officers go through is just horrific. But you know, it very much mirrors the way the military people were treated after the Vietnam War. I got a little bit of taste of that when I joined the military, because after the draft was ended, they opened up a lot of jobs to women. And that included electronics jobs, aviation electronics jobs, mechanical jobs. So I thought, wow, I can learn electronics in the Air Force, because I decided I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I could get good training and the GI Bill to help me go to school, pay my bills. So I did that. And I was a kind of a curiosity in terms of wearing my uniform. So I didn't get the brunt of the anti-war, anti-military fever. It was more like, you're in the military? That's kind of cool. Or, wow, whatever. But my male colleagues did. I mean, you basically, I don't want to say spat upon, but very poorly treated. But then after Reagan came along and rebuilt the military, then in the late 80s, you had movies like Top Gun with Tom Cruise, and there was kind of like more of a celebration of military culture. And then you had the first Gulf War, and people saw those precision-guided munitions. I was working at RAND at the time. And suddenly, oh my God, if you were in the military, you were worshipped. You're a general. You're a colonel. Oh, and I mean, it was almost too much for me. It's like, because when I went at the Pentagon, I mean, I was the protocol equivalent of a 3.5-star general. So I was hanging out with basically 3- and 4-star generals, sometimes 1-star generals, whatever. So some of them were pretty cool. Some of them were not. But it's kind of interesting. I ended up liking the Navy admirals the most. They were the smartest, and I'm not sure why that was, but that was my take. Okay, as part of my little rant, let me talk about renaming military bases. So my wonderful niece, Jenna Wagner, who's a captain in the Army, she's stationed at Fort Gordon. And she's also a dentist. She's awesome. Anyway, I went to Fort Gordon because Brigadier General Doug Buchholz, I remember, when I was at the Pentagon, he invited me, come on out here, you know, give a talk, and I gave a talk there and traveled to Fort Gordon. Now, who is Gordon? I have no clue, okay? But I know Fort Gordon, I know where it is. I know Jenna is there now, Captain Wagner. She went to Fort Benning. Who's Benning? I don't know. I went to Fort Bragg, rode in an attack helicopter, did all kinds of interesting things there. I don't know who Bragg is. These are just names of bases where I had experiences. I don't recall any kind of who is Bragg, like a statue or anything like that. No, just Fort Bragg, where a Special Operations Command is. So, what? You're going to rename these places? You know, Senator Warren did something, and thank God for President Trump. Okay, he just said, there's no way I'll sign that. No way. First of all, are you kidding me? First of all, why are you wasting time on this? Do you know how much that would cost to try to rename, change? And then how would you explain things? Oh, I was stationed at, you know, Fort Gordon. Now it's called, what was it called before? Oh, and in World War II, what was it called? You know, it is just like nuts, people. nuts. Those names don't mean anything. They're names of places now. Whatever they were originally named for is meaningless. I am so mad at the military brass, the ones that criticized our president. That is so wrong. So wrong. I mean, I used to have discussions with admirals and people, when I was at the Pentagon. You do not criticize the president. He's your commander-in-chief. I remember actually getting in a discussion with one admiral who said, I don't actually even vote because I have to follow the commander-in-chief and I don't want politics to get into it. I'm like, you can still vote. I was horrified because I've always voted, always feel like you should vote. But nope, he didn't want to vote. Okay, I think and hope that a lot of Democrats are waking up because a lot of them are not aware of what's going on. They're not hearing about what's going on. And by the way, I just want to interject something. Hi, Andy Marlowe. Just wanted to give you a shout out. Okay. When you're talking to Democrats, okay, one of the things that you could say is that if you want to save your party, Democrats have to lose big in November. Because if they don't, then that's saying that this strategy of whatever they're doing now works. In the same way that the Democratic Party in the late 80s, first with Walter Mondale, then with Michael Dukakis, lost big, the only way the Democratic Party can reclaim itself is to lose big. And then the people who are more moderate in the Democratic Party, you can actually get another viable party going. But if they win, that says all this is working, and this is what the American people want. So if you're a Democrat, whoa, don't let your Trump derangement syndrome ruin your party for you, because he's only here until 2024 or 2025, January 2025. You got to think about the long-term prospects of your party. So I would tell that to Democrats. So I'm noticing that everybody who changes from Democrat to Republican, or at least or backs off from the Democrats, if nothing else, you got to give them time. I was just watching last night's Sean Hannity, because Leo Terrell, it's amazing, okay? He sounds like a conservative almost right now. This guy used to be the most obnoxious far leftist in my mind. But for him, it was when Joe Biden said, I'm pretty sure this is what set him off, you ain't black. That was it, okay? So I was talking to Robert, my stepson, yesterday. And I think he was he told me it didn't really bother him about the shutdown. I mean, he didn't bother with the masks or anything. He just did his own thing. But part of that is because he's 70, he's retired. I'm older, I'm retired. It doesn't really affect us that much. It's not like we couldn't work, he's still fine. And he's just sort of easygoing. But when I showed him some of the videos about the cancel culture, oh my God, he was like, he hates that. He hates, and this was from before too, he hates that because people say something, they're kind of ruined or they're shut up. That's really a problem. Democrats are going to lose a lot of people. If they enforce this kind of groupthink, group saying everything, you all have to say the same, you cannot deviate. Oh my God, that's like the Cultural Revolution in China. It's going to backfire, okay? There's a lot of people going to be scared and they're not going to say anything. Okay, so those of us who can speak out, by golly, let's speak out. I mean, what are you going to do to me? Nothing. I'm not worried about it. But these other people, okay, so he really doesn't like that. That is just horrific to him. So I think Sean Hannity, I didn't like what he said to Leo Torre. He goes, are you going to vote for Trump? Are you going to vote for Trump? Don't put people in that situation. It's like when you change parties or political philosophies, you got to give the person time. Don't jump on them, okay? I've changed so much. I mean, when I did this video that kind of went viral about Christine Blasey Ford, I got on and said, I'm a feminist, I've always supported women, blah, blah, blah. Well, I wouldn't call myself a feminist now. I didn't realize what had happened, what was going on with third wave feminism. I'd kind of been out of that. I didn't understand, when they said SJW, what's that? I mean, I just started looking things up. Social justice warrior. It wasn't until I started looking into this and learning more and more, I'm like, oh my gosh. So you have to ask yourself, what can you do? Okay? I think if you have kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, talk to them when they watch movies. Okay? Just discuss it afterwards. Like, what's the message here? What are they trying to tell you? You notice there's no mention of God, no mention of religion, whatever. Just talk to them about that if you are religious. Oh my gosh, speaking of religion, I'm not a churchgoer, but I find it abhorrent what these so-called rules about social distancing and what is being done to churches. We've got to break those rules. If pastors have to break those rules, cannot put up with that, okay? They're trying to destroy religious traditions in this country because that is definitely something that's going on. There's an attempt to destroy the nuclear family. There's an attempt to, keep people apart and make people kind of crazy. I mean, think of all these people who so want a cause in their life that they will just join protest after protest after protest, okay? They can't pick one thing and stick to it. It just goes all over the map. So the only thing good is a lot of these people aren't going to have kids, and conservatives will. That's the hope, okay? So I am actually finding that I'm just talking to people. Just talking to people. And telling them about my support for President Trump, even in this area. Past a Hispanic man who worked for Santa Monica. And when he started talking to me, he put his mask on. I said, you got to wear that mask? Are they making you? He goes, if you get three times, you have to. If you get it 3 times, then you have to wait. One time you get a warning. Second time you get a warning, but third time you get laid off. And I said, that is really bad. He goes, yeah, I have trouble breathing with it on. And I said, have you ever thought of waiting until you get one warning? I mean, I think if I were in your shoes, I'd get one warning. Because you might not get it. Because people would report him to the city if he did it. And I said, I wouldn't take a chance to get to 2 because then you have no margin. But I said, I said, I'm curious, what do you think about this whole Black Lives Matter? They get mad if you say all lives matter. I said, how does the Hispanic community feel about that or whatever? I said, because all lives matter. And he said, yes. And I said, I used to be a Democrat, but I'm definitely like our president because he believes in all Americans. And I don't know, I just don't feel like I think Trump might win big. I think he might win big. Oh, and I'm going to close with a joke from Robert yesterday. And I wrote it down. Now, for those of you who don't know, a dodo bird was a bird on islands that evolved on islands, and then when the explorers came, humans were on these islands for the first time, the dodo bird would just kind of walk up to humans. They had no fear of humans, and there were these big birds, no wings, because they didn't have to fly away, and they were just slaughtered, went extinct. So we say dodo like you're stupid now, but they just had not evolved any fear of humans. So Robert said, it should be illegal to criticize a Democrat because it's like shooting a dodo bird. With that, see you next week.